Hey everyone, what's up? Welcome back. Today I've got another special early sneak peek for you of an upcoming game. This one goes by the name Godbreakers. It is a third-person action combat roguelike where you battle your way through stages, fighting hordes of enemies, taking on large bosses, collecting upgrades and power-ups, all while exploring 6 distinct, ever-shifting biomes full of different dynamic challenges. So I got to play through the entire game recently, and I'm here to give you a full breakdown of what it is all about. Thank you to Thunderful for sponsoring today's video. They gave me the opportunity to try it out early, and I had a fun time with it. Like, I genuinely think this is a game some of you could enjoy for sure. And if you like what you see, we got links available below. All right, let's go ahead and dive right in, checking out Godbreakers. So as mentioned, this is a roguelike through and through. It has got the classic loop of going in, pushing as far as you can, eventually dying, and then starting over, getting some progress and power-ups along the way, making you stronger for subsequent runs. Specifically, the gameplay loop in Godbreakers starts with you beginning each run at the base of the solar system, where you will select from one of 2 starting planets. Whichever one you pick, you will then fight your way through stages one at a time, clearing enemies and the occasional mini-boss in your path along the way, also collecting an assortment of gear and upgrades that make you stronger. Then eventually, you'll arrive at the final boss of that planet. This is going to be a larger, much more difficult fight. Defeating these that will then let you progress to the next tier of the solar system, where once again you will be picking from one of 2 planet options. And as expected, the further you push in, the more difficult things get up, with the challenge ramping up rather significantly. But of course, you're not going to make it all the way to the end immediately. You probably won't make it all the way to the end in your first several runs. As is the case with most roguelites, in your first couple of runs, it's going to be a learning experience, and you're going to die a lot. When you do, you spawn back in your home base, and it's time to start the run over again. Now, beyond whatever knowledge you personally pick up from your encounters, like learning what the different enemies are, how to deal with them, counter them, and all of that, there is also account progression and unlocks that make you stronger on top of gaining access to new weapons, which opens up a variety of different playstyles. So that is the game in a nutshell. Let's go into some more specifics. Starting with combat, this is actually one of the game's strong suits. Like, it feels fantastic, to be honest. Really has a good sense of weight and feedback to all the various attacks, abilities, and skills, which is pretty crucial, as fighting things is what you're doing 99% of the time. So it's pretty important that this is gotten right, and I would say they did get it right. It feels good to play. Now, with every single weapon, you have got a host of different attacks available. There is your primary attack, your secondary attack, the fact that you can combo by alternating primary into secondary. There is then also a charge attack and air attack for both your primary and secondary, as well as dash attacks and unique weapon abilities. And one thing that helps make combat feel quite responsive in this game is the fact that it lets you animation cancel most all attacks, abilities, and casts, resulting in the ability to quickly respond and react to whatever it is enemies are doing. You'll be zipping around, doing your various attack combos, canceling to avoid damage, then diving back in to dish out more damage, and every weapon has its own variations. So depending on the weapon that you're using, each of these attacks are going to be completely different. These are actually not just weapons, but they're referred to as archetypes. In fact, there are 6 different archetypes in the game, and yes, each of those does come with a corresponding weapon. So first, you have got the Lancer archetype, who uses a polearm. This is the starting weapon. It's the one that you begin with, and it's just well-rounded. It's got a mid-tier for all of the stats, and those stats being power, speed, range, and defense. And then every single weapon and archetype in the game will have different levels of each of those 4 stats. This also generates source light faster than the other classes, and source light is the resource that you use to steal enemies' unique abilities, which is a mechanic we'll get to here in a moment. So the starting ability for this weapon has you unleashing a series of slashes that travel forward, damaging and passing through enemies. And as mentioned, this is just like a good, well-rounded archetype. It's not the best at anything, but it's also not the worst. It's right down the middle. It's good. Then there is the Pillar, who carries around this massive totem. This is the tanky, heavy hitter, but also slow. You will gain a Quake stat from the secondary attack, and these stack up, increasing the charge and attack radius that you deal when you slam it down. And the Pillar's starting starting ability does area of effect damage around him while also granting a barrier for every enemy hit. Then you've got the Twin Blade archetype who uses daggers. This is fragile, low range, but very fast and deadly. Gets a 20% crit bonus for any backstab damage, and their starting ability will instantly teleport and backstab up to 3 nearby enemies, also marking them for increased damage in the process. Then there is the Duelist archetype who uses the pickaxe and a blaster. This is one of the 2 archetypes that has a ranged playstyle. So first you build up energy using your melee attacks, and then once this is full, you can fire a blaster for hitting enemies from range. Starting ability here will actually automatically fill up your blaster, so even without going in for melee, you can just shoot off some ranged attacks. Then you've got the Reaper archetype who uses a massive scythe. This is a medium range class, swings weapons in huge arcs. The attacks of this class also summon up these little sentinels, which are tiny balls that follow you around and attack nearby enemies. The starting ability for the Reaper lets you instantly summon 5 sentinels without having to first attack. And then lastly, you have got the Striker archetype who uses Fist. This is a melee brawler. They basically have no range whatsoever, but are devastating up close. They can perform more combo attacks than anyone else, mixing up both the primary and secondary strikes for some devastating hits. And the Striker starting ability unleashes a flurry of strikes, dealing increased damage over time. So yeah, each of the archetypes have their own weapons, they have their own playstyles, and they have their own starting abilities. So you go in, you're going through these 4 tiers of levels with increasing difficulty as you move through them. Again, you start off in the first tier at the edge of the solar system, choosing between the desert and lava biomes. Then you've got the second tier, which has both the noxious poison as well as a lush plant life biome. The third tier is like this trippy cosmic otherworldly biome. And then the fourth tier is basically the big showdown versus the final boss of the system, fighting on a platform right outside the system's star or sun equivalent, basically. And as with most roguelikes, you start at the bottom, you work your way towards the end, ultimately trying to defeat the final boss, but it's difficult. You're gonna die on the first level, and then you're gonna learn some, and then you'll defeat the first boss, and then you'll make it to the second tier, and you'll go in there, and you'll probably die somewhere in there, and then you'll start over, and that's kind of the whole roguelike progression, how they present it here in this game. Every single planet, though, not only has like its own unique visuals and different room layouts, as well as environmental objects to interact with, the enemies are also fairly unique to the planets as well. You've got an assortment of all sorts of different types of enemies, and it's made up of some of the usual suspects. Like you'll have your basic melee guys who run up and try to hit you. Then you'll have larger tanky variants who will like slam the ground, doing some area damage. You've got enemies that will charge in a straight line, trying to knock you about, ones that will stay further back and shoot from a distance, and there are even various support enemies that will buff and or heal their allies. What's more though is that you can steal all of the attacks of the enemies in this game, including the bosses. As you fight, as you just engage in combat, you accumulate what is known as source light, that thing that I mentioned earlier. It's kind of like an ultimate gauge or something like that. It's a resource that you build up in combat. Once this is at 100%, it then lets you execute any nearby low health enemy, in the process stealing their unique attack. So you're going to be able to, like, whatever unique attacks that the enemies do that you see them using against you, you can take those and then use them against the enemies. You'll be able to do like this massive chomp, shoot a laser, burrow underground, and then emerge for huge damage, or throw down your own totems that will buff and or heal you. Again, every single enemy in the game has their own unique attack that they use against you, and once you've got this gauge at 100% and they're at low health, you will execute them, take it for yourself, and then be able to use it against the other enemies. And this, beyond your various weapon attacks and skills, is something that you are constantly encouraged to use in combat. You are mixing your various attacks, your combos, your air attacks, your charge attacks, your primary and secondary attacks, your weapon ability, and also weaving in using the stolen abilities that you got from the enemies in the levels that you're moving through. Boss fights in the game are also quite interesting and well done, with a variety of really cool mechanics. Let me give you a couple of examples. So first there is Marik. This is the final boss in the lava biome. He is kind of like a gladiator. He's got 4 arms that he will slam on the ground or slap right in front of him, trying to damage you. He'll leap up into the air and attempt to belly flop on top of you. At the end of phase 1, he sits in the middle of the room and starts striking the ground non-stop, causing chunks from the ceiling to fall to the ground. And then these form these expanding squares that go across the entire arena that you have to avoid. And then during the second phase, he starts doing this cartwheel around the arena while also summoning up some adds. And then during the final phase, number 3, most of his abilities also then start leaving damage dealing rings on the ground on top of the the initial hits that they do. And all of like the boss fights in this game are like this. They will be phased with increasing difficulty as you progress through the phases. Or there's the other boss, Ur, who is the final boss of the desert biome. It's like this big floating head. He will summon up 3 large tentacles that then slam on the ground that you have to avoid. You must actually damage the base of these in order to break the shield that's surrounding his head in the middle. Breaking that shield will then cause him to unleash this massive explosion that covers the entire arena, and the only protection is behind these tiny little barriers that drop on the ground. So you gotta run behind them before it explodes, or else you'll die. And then after that explosion, his shield will be down and you can finally run up to and damage him. And then once you eventually move into phase 2, he starts summoning in loads of adds on top of those slamming tentacles. Rinse and repeat, eventually make it to phase 3, and then all of the above is happening, but his head is also simultaneously shooting out a massive beam that you have to dodge. And that's just like some of the bosses in the initial solar system. As you progress through the system and you make it towards the end boss, the fights just get more and more interesting. And the end boss in particular, the boss before the end boss as well as the end boss, really cool, interesting mechanics. Like, I really enjoy these, and I hope to see more as the game continues. Now, as mentioned, and as with many roguelikes, as you progress through missions, you'll collect upgrades that make you stronger. Here's what this looks like. You're going to be finding gear pieces. There are slots for your shoulder, your chest, your hands, your pants, as well as your feet. These come with all sorts of different bonuses. You'll have things that will apply debuffs to nearby enemies whenever you steal an ability. You'll gain damage reflect when you activate your skills. You can make it so that any critical strikes you do will trigger a chain lightning, damaging and bouncing from one enemy to the next. There's also 14 different essences for you to collect, and these are just passive boosts that you can get for during your run. They will do things like make it so that you apply debuffs such as poison and fire on any attacks that you do. They can increase your health and healing, give you a automatic chance to reflect damage, increase your crit chance and damage, make it so that you have better source light generation so you're stealing enemy abilities more often, or just flat out increase your move speed. So these gear pieces, as well as the essences, you're going to be finding them all over the place. They will drop when you kill certain enemies. You can loot them from chests that you find in the environment. There are also these structures that can drop them at random in exchange for things like life or some in-match currency. And they've got these mid-run vendors that you're going to come across who will sell a random assortment of this stuff. And you can like re-roll them as well, so you can get a different assortment if you don't like what's available at the moment. Also, as you progress through the game, there are a variety of permanent abilities and upgrades that make you stronger. So first you've got echoes. Now, while you're going through a run, you're constantly picking up this currency, which is used at the end of the run while you're in your home base to unlock these permanent upgrades. Each of these comes in 3 tiers, making them progressively better. It starts in the first tier and then costs more to make it better all the way up to the 3rd tier. And here you can get things like the ability to grant random equipment items at the start of every run. This is essentially an additional ability on top of your weapon ability and your weapon strikes and the abilities that you steal from enemies. This is a 3rd ability for you to use. You can increase the number of rerolls that you get at the merchant. You can grant yourself more options whenever fragments or essences drop. You can increase your source light generation. You can make it so that you get more healing from your coil. That's just the name for the health potions in this game. You can increase the odds of coming across shrines and chest spawns in your runs, and you can provide various boosts to the cooldown rate as well as your character move speed. And then I mentioned how every single archetype and starting weapon has a starting skill. Well, they all come with 2 additional skills to be unlocked as well. So as an example, the Reaper class with the scythe, they start off with that ability that I mentioned where you can summon 5 sentinels. You can also unlock the Meteor ability, which will consume all swarm sentinels to deal damage in an area. This scales based on the number of sentinels consumed, and then enemies killed this way generates new sentinels. Or you can get the armor ability, which will consume sentinels to grant you and your allies 1 stack of armor, as well as rampage, which boosts your damage and move speed per 1 consumed. Every other class archetype and weapon in the game also has their starter and 2 additional abilities for you to unlock. Now, once you defeat the final boss, you make it all the way through the roguelike progression, you get to the final boss, you kill him. At that point, you unlock the Tangles, which is what can really ramp up difficulty and add replayability. Here's a few examples of the types of Tangles that you can apply to your future runs. There is Wing Clipped, which will reduce your stamina charges by 1. Stamina charges are what you use for your dashing. There's Parting Gift, which makes it so that when enemies die, they spawn an explosive mine. Planetary Disarray randomizes the biome order of your run. The Royal Guard turns all regular enemies enemies into elite enemies, and then License to Kill makes it so that any direct hit will instantly kill both the player as well as enemies, except for bosses. So it's one shot all the way through your run until you get to the boss, and then only you can be one shot. Again, really ramps up the difficulty and adds some replayability. There are a bunch of in-game cosmetic unlocks as well, not at all tied to anything monetary. It's all in-game. Essentially, the game has a variety of different quests and achievements. Completing certain ones will unlock new cosmetic options for your character's body as well as its head, with different color combos and funny looking heads that you can put on your character. There's also weapon skins available. Once again, you get these by completing certain quests and achievements. Usually just like do something difficult using this weapon and it's going to give you a new skin variation. And then lastly, worth noting is that the game has co-op. You can actually play in groups of up to 4 people for all sorts of crazy shenanigans. It will scale, making things more difficult. In this preview, I was primarily playing solo, but yeah, you can play it with up to a group of up to 4 people. All right, so some of my initial thoughts after playing this preview, starting with the things that I really enjoyed. I think the combat feels fantastic, and this is probably the #1 most important thing for a game like this to get right, because as mentioned, most of the time you are engaged in combat, so combat better feel good. I also really enjoy the game's visuals. It's really sharp and clean and looks quite nice in motion as well. Like, it's just a good looking game. It definitely has its own unique style to it, but I think it looks really nice. It's really pleasing on the eyes. Performance was fantastic. I don't think I saw a frame drop at any point. It just ran really well the entire time. And I will say, I think the boss fights are just incredibly well done and interesting. Right now, there's a major boss at the end of each one of the biomes as you progress towards the final boss. So you got 2 in the first tier, 2 in the second tier, 1 in the third tier, and then the final one in the fourth and final tier. And I really hope they continue to add upon and expand this as the game progresses over time, because from everything that they've done so far, the boss fights have been really, really cool. In terms of things that I think could use some improvements to make the game better, for starters, I would just love to see some more dynamic events beyond simply killing enemies. For the most part, you go into a room, you clear the enemies, and then you move to the next room. Now, each one of the environments kind of has their own interactable elements. Like, there are levels where you can attack these like crystal shards, which will shoot out 3 beams, but I would like to see some just more variety in here and different things that you could do, more challenges. Like, maybe you have certain rooms that have jumping puzzles or just straight up puzzles for you to solve. I just think it'd be a nice addition if they can mix it up a little bit here and there beyond just straight up combat in every single room. I would also say that I feel like full runs felt kind of short, even with some modifiers applied. It didn't actually take too long before I got to and defeated the final boss. Now, the Tangles certainly add to that, but I think that they could probably add more to this. I wouldn't even mind seeing like additional tiers before you get to the final boss tier in the solar system. I think that could be really, really nice. And yeah, speaking of which, I think I'd just like to see them add more biomes or planets or just places that you move through in the environment over time. But other than those things, it's just really areas of improvement. Overall, I genuinely did enjoy my time playing this game. So that concludes our preview. Hopefully this gives you a better idea of what to expect from Godbreakers. The game is officially launching. If you'd like to learn more and check it out for yourself, of course, we have links below in the description. But thank you as always for watching. Hope you enjoyed the vid, and I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy.